Another question that came up about my snowman project was my landscape, and then sort of the clay quality that I achieved on the actual balls of the snowman, or the big snowballs. And so I'll just run through those techniques really quickly. The first technique was just using the landscape object just as you did in your presentation. And the only difference is that once I played with some of these values, and I'll just bump up the height a little bit to be little bit more dramatic about this. Maybe also change the size quite a bit, make it very big. That was too big. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now I could play with, you know, the all the furrows and all the different, you know, values here to get some kind of different results. And it's not real smooth at this point. And all I did was I threw this inside a HyperNurbs object. So once you throw the landscape inside the HyperNurbs, it generates a lot more geometry, but it smooths it out really well. And so I got a little bit more control over that. It looked less like a mountain, more like a landscape. And then playing with the furrows at that point really got some different results. Now, the other technique that I used for the effect on the snowball was actually a couple steps in this process, and it was I started out with a sphere object. And let me get rid of my landscape here so I don't have to demonstrate that point again. And I started out with just a simple sphere, and this is a combination between generating a new material, and I'll call this my snowman material. Now the technique that I ended up using was I applied a displacement onto my sphere object, and I used a little bit of a noise to displace the object to create some irregularity in the shape. And in order to do this, what I'll do is a two-step process. The first thing is that the sphere itself, or whatever object you're applying it to, has to be made editable. So it can't be a parametric primitive, it's got to be a polygon object. The next step is to go into the displacement, turn on displacement, and I could load a texture in here to drive the displacement, but what I want to do is I'm going to use a noise. Now the minute that I add noise, you can see the effect of the texture here in the preview. What it's doing is it's taking whatever texture we've applied, and I'll just double click on that material, and it uses the grayscale. It'll use anything that's white and cause it to advance or raise up from the surface, and anything that's gets closer to black, it starts to recess from the surface. And so the idea is you can create some irregularity on the surface. Now I just double clicked. I'll just go back to the displacement channel. If I just chose noise from this drop down menu. There it is, noise. And then I double clicked on the noise itself. And if I go into the shader tab, I can find that noise pull down menu. And way over to the right, I can choose a different kind of noise if I want to. And I chose a smoother style of noise. I also played a bit with the scale of the noise, but I'm going to let it default just the way that it is for now, just to show you the results. I'll go back to the displacement. I want to drag and drop onto my sphere, and I'll give that a quick render. Now you can start to see here that it starts to deform a little bit the shape of the object. And if I go back into my displacement, and I'm just in the root of the displacement channel, I turned on sub-polygon displacement, and I made sure that the geometry was rounded. Okay, I'm going to turn it back off just for a second. I'll give it a quick render. And in the case of the sphere, you can see that I pay a huge price for render times. It takes a moment, but you can see the geometry that it created. Now the problem when it's not rounded geometry is you start getting this weird creasing going on. So I'll turn on rounded geometry, and I'll give that another render, and you'll see that it kind of smooths these things out. So it kind of looks a lot like, you know, a plastic kind of feel to it, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I still have my specular turned on. But if I turn my specular off, and I take the strength of this down quite a bit so it's not so dramatic, and if I just go into the noise itself and I bump up the scale, so maybe I'll take the global scale and I'll make it 200%, so that kind of stretches the noise over the sphere, and I'll give that a render. Combined with information on the color channel, and then playing around with these techniques on the displacement, between, you can start to see the result that I have here. Now it's much softer now, and that's a combination of the global scale being up, and then also on the displacement I took the strength way down. So let me just, for the sake of the demo, let me take that back up much higher, and I'll give that a real quick render. There we go. With a real quick render, you can start to see how that deforms, and it looks a little bit more like, you know, an irregular snowball that you would make. And you can actually exaggerate that and really play with that and get some different results. So those are a couple of techniques that I used in the snowman. You can experiment with those if you decide you want to add another layer of refinement to it. But this will also come in handy into the next projects. There are a lot of really good looking snowman projects or snow people projects. And we'll keep pushing forward in the next project.